What's up, everybody? Welcome to Are You Down with LPT, the podcast where agents like you share their stories, experiences, and insights to help each other level up and thrive. In every episode, we're diving deep into the real-life challenges, wins, and lessons from the front lines. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this is the place to connect, learn, and grow together. So, if you're ready to get down with LPT and take your game to the next level, let's jump in. Okay, welcome back to Are You Down with LPT? I'm with two of our best and brightest here.
Oh.
Yeah.
Alyssa's in the room.
Yeah, Alyssa's
Tracey's here.
Yeah.
And me?
Yeah.
All
so
right.
we're here with Jim Hibbs, real estate expert, and Tracey Carr, who is our state broker here with LPT. So thanks for joining me.
You bet.
We're talking a little bit about just doing a market update, market check-in. It's been a while since we've done it. I think the market continues to change and evolve a little bit. It's been a different year. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about the number of homes that have sold in relation to the population of the United States and how we are in the bottom fourth. So when you talk about sales per capita or whatever you want to call it, bottom fourth of what it typically is. So, you got times like COVID that obviously being the top 25%, and then you got the normal market. We're actually in the bottom 25%, which, was, I knew obviously we're in the top half or anything like that, but maybe it was not quite as strong as I anticipated, although I think there's some things to be encouraged about out there. So let's just, let's kick it off. We are coming out of a time, we talk about really the end of spring break through July 4th is probably the best 100 days in real estate. Might have stopped a little earlier this year, it felt like. But either way, that season's over. And so we're kind of coming into a new season. So Tracey, what are you seeing kind of as we enter this late summer lull or whatever you want to call it?
Well, it's interesting because just last week we had an uptick in listings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not typically what we see. So, we always try to say that real estate's cyclical, right? And it kind of follows a typical curve. But it seems like ever since COVID, really, that's kind of gone out. Out the window. So every year's been a little bit different, and to see, upticks in listings coming into getting close to August and fair and back to school, we typically see things slow down then, but listings were up last week. So that's
even
good.
Our meeting this morning, like there was a lot of listings and there's a lot of listings that are coming. The question would be, are the sales following it? And Jim, I know you watch the market. You were always kind of on top of showing activity and listings. Yeah. How typical is this summer been to others, and what agents, what can we do to kind of stay productive?
Well, the first thing I tell you hit it at the beginning of this, that this has just been a strange year where our cycles feel like it's week to week.
Yeah.
You'll have a week where things are pretty slow and not much going on, followed by pure mayhem for the next week of new listings and buyers and activity. So it's really hard to gauge where exactly we are, but I will tell you, the typical summer slowdown has happened. Right after July 4th, you get a little influx of buyers and things, and that's occurred. Towards the end of July, you see some activity. Then we get towards the state fair, comes to a screeching halt for a while, and right after Labor Day, you have another pop, and that runs, into October, and then by Thanksgiving, we're all on holiday. Although we sell homes in December, don't we, Tracey?
We do.
All the time.
House doesn't look any better than it does in December.
That's exactly right. You smell the pines and the cookies. And thinking Christmas on this hot day.
Lovely.
Anyway, by the way, this is an aside, but 104.1 is playing Christmas music right now. I don't know if you've noticed that. Anyway,
I don't need that.
Hopefully they've quit that by the time we publish this. Anyway, it was just shocking to me at 105 degrees and Christmas music on. But that's an aside, as I typically do here and there. But I would say that the market has been typical other than the listings. And we are starting to grow the listings. The good news in all that, I think what we're doing is we're getting back to normal 2019 was the last time we really had consistency over 4,000, and that's really where we should be, and that gives buyers more choice. I think it's still a seller's market, although that is kind of changing. Price points change, whether it's a seller's market or an even market. I don't think we have a buyer's market right now.
Yeah, could be. You just touched on it. First time we've been over 4,000 listings since 2019. And, you said we don't have a buyer's market.
Yeah.
So we're over 4,000. What does it mean then for buyers? If it's not a buyer's market.
Well, in comparison, in 2020, we struggled to have 1,400 homes on the market. And it was just, the buyer bus drove around and several buyers got off the bus. They all bid on the home, won, and the rest of them got back on the bus to the next house. Now, those buyers can get in our car again. We drive around and we look at 4 or 5, 6 or 7 different homes. Yes, some of them are still flying off the shelf pretty quick, but they have more choice and more time to make a decision on a home. The unfortunate part for the sellers is there's no angst generally from a buyer right now to hurry up and make an offer. And so from an agent standpoint, you have to understand that if you're working with the buyers. From a seller standpoint, that's your job, the listing agent, to be out there and pushing to get that house sold, because you're the one that needs to reach out to the buyer's agent. Keep on them, because the buyers have more choices today. I think that's the number one thing from a listing agent standpoint. You have to be more active in reaching out, communicating, marketing than you did 4 years ago when put a sign in the yard and the house was sold.
Yeah, I think from a buyer standpoint, you touched on it, I think it is better for buyers, certainly now than it's been. I mean, you alluded to it, but I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I'm like, you know what, you don't have to make a quick decision, because this, could the house sell tomorrow? Sure, but there's a good chance it's not going to. And I think buyers now don't have to be rushed. They don't have to, in some cases, they might have to be rushed and pay over, asking and all that stuff. But for the most part, I think buyers have a little more time to make a decision. They don't have to go crazy. They don't have to and probably shouldn't be waiving inspections. And so it's definitely more balanced than what it was, and back to that. But on the seller side, Tracey, it's not doom and gloom, although, I've got a short sale right now, and, we've got it listed 40 grand under what they bought it for, and I've got a house listed 30 grand under what people bought it for, and, I have a lot of that going on. I don't think it's doom and gloom, but it's definitely, hey, how many offers are we going to get, and let's worry about negotiating. It's kind of changed a little bit. So what should our sellers and our agents be adjusting to right now?
Well, I think it's important, and we've talked about this in our meetings, of, being really good at doing a comparative market analysis, right? And using the right numbers, the right homes to find that number that you're advising your sellers to use. Because if you price the home right, in May, our stats were that the home was priced correctly for any home that we listed in the month of May, it sold within 8.5 days, right? And that average sale price in May was $343. Okay, but then we look at June. I thought this was really interesting. We look at June, and of the homes that we listed in June, the average list price was $272. And they sold within 5 days. That's a big difference between May and June. I really thought that was interesting. So I think pricing the home appropriately is really key. Making sure you're giving them those stats. If they say, hey, I want to try a little higher, and just talking to them. And I always think it's good to use scenarios, right? Use past experiences, or talk to other agents if you're a newer agent about, okay, what happens if we overprice a house, right? And then when you give them a scenario of, hey, this happened to one of my clients, I don't want you to be in that same boat, I think that resonates more than just saying, well, this is what I recommend, and showing them the stats, that's good, but it's also good to know, what kind of seller you're working with, and they're, what type of personality are you dealing with? Are they going to be stats driven? Are they going to be, analytical, or are they going to be more like flowers and pictures and everything's pretty? I mean, you need to know who you're dealing with, and to go in well versed in how to speak their language.
Well, I think that stat's really interesting and gives kind of evidence of the pricing really matters. the price point really matters as far as the speed of the market. And under 300 in 5 days versus what was the number before?
327.
327, and that was 8.5 days. I think that really, you have to be aware of the price point you're at and what is happening in that price point. Because if you're under 300, you've got a much larger pool of buyers looking than you do if you're over 500.
One of those statistics you shared, Tracey, looking back, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think both May and June, I think in May, it was about 40% of homes we listed sold in that 4 or 5 day period. And then in June, same thing, about 40% sold in 8.5 days or less. But it's the other 60% where they are sitting and there are price reductions or multiple price reductions. And I think it's so important, as you mentioned, when we were in COVID, it's like, okay, it's maybe my price range is 2 to 275. Let's list it at 3 and probably still sell it, right?
Right.
Well, today we got to probably, narrow that in a little bit. What price point are we in? So Jim just mentioned if we're under 3, maybe we can be a little more aggressive. But if we're, 4 to 600, especially, I think like, okay, what's the low end of that range? Probably need to be a lot closer to that.
And while I think it's important that you're using the neighborhood to get your price point, right, and the same similar style of home, you also need to look at, okay, what's our competition? You need to broaden that area and say, okay, so if we're looking at this price point, how many homes are in this price point, right? Because some people don't care, and we're very fortunate living in Des Moines that everything's about 20 minutes away, So people aren't afraid to, jump from community to community. So you need to pay attention to that because that's also your competition. It's not just neighborhood based in terms of when you're looking at actives.
One other thing I would add to that I used to do back in the day, and then market took off, was look at expired, canceled, and see what didn't sell because, again, COVID, everything sold. Well, today that's not true.
No.
And homes are coming off the market and people aren't getting the number they wanted or needed. And so they're pulling that house off the market. So I think when it's an art or a science or whatever, maybe it's both when you do a CMA, and you need to spend more time, really dialing that in than we've had to do in the past.
Yep, and cross-check it, right? So if you're doing yours in Matrix, make sure you look at RPR, make sure you go to the assessor site, make sure you're pulling those, for sale by owners that aren't necessarily going to show up in Matrix, so,
yeah. Okay, so interest rates been hovering around 6.5%. I heard Matt Nolan say, that's kind of what they're dialed in around that range right now. Historically, that's not crazy, but it does seem high compared to what a lot of people are sitting at right now when they're used to that 3. Tracey, are buyers, are they adjusting to this 6.5 or this new way of rates?
Well, I think they are. I mean, it's kind of like gas prices, right? Like, it initially goes up and there's that sticker shock. But I also do think that there's a lot of pent up need, and people are still sitting on the fence, right? And they're still waiting. And so it's a matter of agents getting out there and educating their buyers. And I know that we've talked in previous meetings too about kind of thinking outside the box, right? And thinking about, okay, well, if it's the interest rate and they're not finding anything in their price point of what their monthly budget is, well, look at how much would it cost to go and ask a seller to do a buy down, right, for them, and think about it the other way. We think about it for sellers, right? Oh, I'm going to try to do a buy down to attract more people. But if you're representing a buyer and they're not finding anything and they have I want to be within $1,500 a month, well, go and talk to the lender and say, what would it cost and what price point could we bump up to still keep them with a buy down? So
yeah. Jim, we talk about rates a lot, with Matt and just around the office. Any insight that where you feel they're headed?
Well, I think, first of all, we've been in this 6 to 7 for 3 years now, and so I think people have become a little accustomed to that. So if we can get into the high 5s, I think you're going to have a run on a lot of buyers getting into the market that maybe right now are just kind of standing by. Which, to your point, Tracey, we can educate them and help them understand, if we do get that flux of buyers when the interest rates get into the fives, guess what? There's a bunch of buyers and you're back into that, prices going up. So now is a good time to buy. But I believe by the end of the year, we're a hair under 6. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of movement. There's too many headlines, too many moving pieces right now for things to get, for interest rates to get too low. And a lot of headwinds along that. So if we got to 5.5%, I'd be happy as a clam.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happy as a clam is, but
is that another one of those old school terms?
Clams are they? Is that a well-known thing that they're
I'll have
happy?
to look that up. I have no idea. That I'm sure that came from my father at some point, who's 80, so he's been around a while.
That's,
I always try to come up with some old school.
I appreciate
soup to
that.
nuts. I think was last time.
Yeah, soup to nuts. So we now we're a month in to the second half of the year, and we had a good first. I certainly don't want to be doom and gloom because we had a solid first half of the year at our company, and
we've got 835 closed sales to date for LPT.
Nice.
So
we are well above. We had kind of set a goal, and we're definitely above where we wanted to be, and so excited about that, and I think it's only going to get better, right? Like I'm optimistic about where the market is headed.
Absolutely.
Where Jim just mentioned rates, but if we can get a rate that starts with a 5 and kind of consistently at least stays there, I'd like to see a little less than that, but I think that's going to help quite a bit. So as we gear up for the second half and we think about agents listening, Trace, maybe you start. Tips around listings, communication with your sphere, those type of things. Any tips for our agents?
Well, I would say, we kind of talked about this a little bit last week about when, I started, and anytime like I wanted to generate more business, I think time blocking is huge, right? And if you focus on those expireds, if you focus on, talking to for sale by owners, I think it's a prime opportunity to do that because clearly they have gotten either bad advice or they don't have any advice if they're for sale by owner, right? So this is your opportunity to shine. But also too, work in your sphere. You're out there join groups. I talk to people about that. Like, what do you enjoy doing, right? I love riding my bike. Well, join a bike group. Like, go, increase your sphere and the people that you're interacting with, and the real estate will come and you don't have to be salesy and be like, hey, I sell real estate. You want to buy? Do you want to sell? Like, yuck. But, it just becomes organic when you're talking to people and they say, hey, well, what do you do? Oh, well, I work for, Legacy Realty Violin LPT, and what's that about? So people are always interested to hear about real estate and what's going on in the market. So make sure you're looking at your hot sheet, making sure that you're knowledgeable about what's going on. Go to meetings, listen to the podcast, stay relevant. So that you can have those good conversations and make sure that you're doing good content on your social media.
Yeah. Talked about that this morning, right?
All of those things. Yeah. All those things.
Yeah, that's a great list of things to do. Really understanding the market and the individual markets. As we talked about expireds and things, I was thinking of the downtown market, and I've got a townhome down there. And boy, you wanna drill into a market and kind of some of the issues that we're dealing with in pockets. You would see the number of expired, the different issues down there. So why not, in this period of time, be checking the different markets, West Des Moines, Norwalk, wherever you do your business, because you never know when that opportunity to talk the market's going to come up. And if you've already done the research and you've done the follow-up and you get that buyer that you meet at an open house and suddenly you're looking in a certain area, you already know the market and can help them win that that listing that they find during the search with you. So understanding the market, I think, right now, and making sure you're reaching out to your buyers, staying in touch with folks. We're getting to that point of time too. Once we get through September, you got to start building up 2026 and thinking about those people that may be selling in the next year or two that that you've met, part of your SOI, and reaching out to them and starting to build your 2026. Seems odd in July to be thinking about that, but you should be.
The activities you're doing today are going to impact your fall. They're going to impact next year and beyond. So, we do those activities continually for our future business. I think we've got maybe a couple weeks where it might be a little slow. This is dead week. schools can't have practices, anything like that. I dropped my wife and my daughters off at the airport, and it was packed. 7 a.m, and that place was packed. She sent me a picture of the line to get through security.
Yeah.
So it's a big travel week this week, and then you get into State Fair. And Jim, I remember you sharing those stats from showing time last year and just how they dropped during the State Fair. But then I think we'll see. Maybe when the State Fair is over, we see a pickup usually, and fall is usually a pretty good time to sell real estate. So I think you had a few weeks where maybe we got a little bit of a lull, but I do anticipate that in fall and then even into 2026 we're gonna see a bump in the market. I don't know if you guys share that opinion or not.
And real estate is a 12-month out of the year. Yeah. You've got to work it because sales happen all year long. I think I had a better second half than I did first half in 2024. And you've got to work it no matter what the time of year is, and just understand there are lulls. And I agree, right after the State Fair you'll get a little pop, so right after Labor Day as well. Yep. And fall is usually a pretty good time to buy and sell a house in Iowa.
But that's the thing, those lull times are the times where you can really dive into your business and do those activities that are going to help catapult you then in the next 90 days. So whenever you have those lulls, that's when you really need to kind of dial in, focus, and it will benefit your business.
Because I do believe what you're doing today will be reflected in what happens 90 days from now.
Yep. Absolutely. Great insight today. I appreciate you guys. If you're an agent listening, you should be. Here's what I leave you with. Understand the market. Adjust to the market, stay committed to the actions. Jim just mentioned it. Tracey alluded to it. Like the things we do today are going to impact our business 90 days and further out. So be committed to the actions, and I think the results are going to follow. Guys, I appreciate it. And until next time, this is Are You Down with LPT? That's a wrap for today's episode of Are You Down with LPT? Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you get some valuable takeaways to apply to your journey. New episodes drop every Friday, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss out. And hey, if you have your own story you'd like to share or questions you'd like to dive into, hit us up. Until next time, stay down with LPT and keep leveling up. Catch you in the next one.